The emergency session lights cast sharp shadows across Ambassador Richard Cole's face as he listened to the 47th accusation against humanity. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with voices that had once welcomed Earth's inclusion, but now demanded restrictions, limitations, and control. 15 cycles of cooperation meant nothing to species who feared what they could not match. Ambassador Trell of the Voskin Empire stood at the central podium, his serpentine form coiled with theatrical precision as he addressed the assembly. The human military presence expands unchecked. Their vessels patrol territories far beyond their assigned sectors. Their interference in sovereign affairs threatens the balance we've maintained for millennia. His words drew approving gestures from dozens of delegations. Cole remained seated, his hands folded calmly on the table before him. Beside him, military liaison Helen Brooks sat rigid, her jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. She wanted to respond, to challenge every twisted half-truth, but Cole had ordered silence until the accusations finished. Let them speak, he had said. Let them reveal themselves completely. The Metherian Collective representative spoke next, her crystalline voice chiming through translators. Human rescue operations undermine natural selection. Species must learn to survive their own mistakes. Humanity's constant intervention creates dependency. The irony seemed lost on her that Metherian colonies had called for human help 17 times in the past cycle alone. The Torvan Republic complained about human opposition to their labor caste system. The Zarathi Dominion protested humans sheltering refugees. The Quarathi demanded humans share all medical advances freely while contributing nothing themselves. Species after species stood and aired grievances that amounted to humanity being too helpful, too present, too unwilling to watch others suffer. Cole had prepared responses for each accusation. Data showing human patrols responded only to distress calls. Evidence proving human expansion stayed within agreed boundaries. Casualty reports demonstrating how many lives human intervention had saved. He had charts, recordings, testimony from grateful species. All of it sat unused in his tablet. The vote came swiftly. 42 species supported the Voskin proposal. Only humans and 4 small species voted against. The restrictions were comprehensive and devastating. All human military operations would require council approval. Human colonial expansion would be limited to current territories. Human trade agreements must be reviewed by council committees. Human technology sharing would be mandatory while receiving nothing in return. The speaker, a tall being whose crystalline body refracted light into dancing patterns, announced the decision with formal gravity. The human delegation has 10 cycles to comply with these restrictions. Failure to do so will result in expulsion from the council, economic sanctions, and closure of trade routes. Human vessels will be barred from council space. Human colonies will receive no council protection. Cole stood slowly. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to Earth's representative. They expected argument, perhaps anger, maybe even threats. What they got was disappointment so profound it seemed to chill the air itself. "We understand your position," 4 words delivered with perfect calm. He gathered his documents with deliberate care. Helen and the other 2 advisors followed his lead, packing materials in absolute silence. The chamber watched, confusion spreading among the delegations. Where was the protest, the negotiation, the desperate plea for reconsideration? Cole walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet chamber. Species who had voted for restrictions now shifted uncomfortably. The 4 species who had supported humanity looked terrified, realizing they would face the Council's displeasure without Earth's protection. At the door, Cole paused and turned back. His expression held no anger, no bitterness, just the look of a teacher watching students make a catastrophic mistake. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately. We will honor all existing humanitarian obligations to their completion, but we will no longer participate in Council governance. He let that sink in for 3 heartbeats before continuing. You wanted us contained. You've achieved the opposite. Humanity walks alone now. We hope you understand what you've just done before it's too late. The door closed behind the human delegation with a soft hiss that sounded like the death of something precious. For 10 full seconds, nobody moved. Then the chamber erupted in chaos. Some species celebrated their victory over human aggression. Others demanded to know why the humans hadn't fought the decision. The 4 species who had voted with Earth tried desperately to call for reconsideration. The speaker called for order, but the damage was done. In those 10 seconds of silence, something fundamental had shifted. The galaxy had just severed its connection to the only species willing to respond to every distress call, heal every plague, rescue every stranded ship, and protect every refugee without asking for payment or power. Ambassador Trell smiled from his delegation seat, satisfied that the Voskin plan had succeeded. Remove humanity's freedom of action, and the Empire could expand without human interference. The Serpentine ambassador had no idea that he had just made the greatest miscalculation in galactic history. On Earth, Cole's message reached the human assembly within minutes. They had anticipated this outcome and prepared accordingly. The vote was unanimous. If the Council wanted humanity contained, they would get exactly what they asked for. Every human vessel in Council space received orders to return home. Every human medical team, rescue squad, and peacekeeping force was recalled. Every trade agreement was honored to completion, then terminated. Humanity didn't leave in anger, they left in silence, and that silence would soon become deafening. 7 days passed and the galaxy barely noticed. The Voskin Empire held celebrations across 3 systems, proclaiming their diplomatic victory over human expansionism. Merchants continued trading. Colonies operated their normal routines. Ships traveled established routes. Life went on as it always had, or so it seemed to those not paying attention. On the Torven merchant vessel Prophet's Edge, Captain Dulac reviewed quarterly earnings with satisfaction. The humans had been too competitive anyway, always undercutting prices with their efficient operations. Now Torven merchants could raise rates without human interference. He was contemplating these pleasant thoughts when the main drive exploded. Emergency systems kicked in automatically, but the damage was catastrophic. Life support would fail in 8 hours. The distress beacon activated, broadcasting their position and desperate situation. Dulac wasn't worried. Distress calls were answered within an hour in this sector. Everyone knew that. The human patrol ship Vigilant received the signal. For 15 cycles, Vigilant had responded to every emergency in this region. Commander Sarah Mitchell acknowledged receipt out of habit, then remembered her new orders. Log the distress call and continue patrol route. Her crew stared at her in disbelief. "Ma'am, they'll die if we don't respond," her first officer said quietly. "We're no longer responsible for Council space emergencies. They made that very clear." Mitchell's voice was steady, but her hands gripped the armrests hard enough to leave marks. "Council Defense Forces will respond." The nearest Council vessel arrived 6 hours later. 3 Torven crew members were already dead from oxygen deprivation. Dulac survived, but he would never forget watching human ships pass within range while his people died. The galaxy had changed, and not everyone realized it yet. On the border world of Haven's Edge, the small Frel colony detected incoming raiders. They were a peaceful people, farmers mostly, with no military capability. They had always relied on human rapid response teams. Administrator Kess sent the emergency broadcast with complete confidence that help would arrive within minutes. The human listening post acknowledged the signal. "This transmission is received. Humanity is no longer responsible for Council space security. Please contact Council Defense Forces. Estimated response time is 48 hours. We regret that we cannot assist." The message was polite, professional, and utterly devastating. The raiders needed only 6 hours. They stripped the colony of everything valuable and killed 47 Frel who resisted. The Council Defense Force arrived 2 days later to find survivors huddled in makeshift shelters, staring at the horizon where human ships used to appear like guardian angels. No angels came anymore. In the Zarathi border sector, refugee ships fled persecution in desperate flight toward human territory. 3 transports carried families, children, elderly. 8,000 beings who had committed no crime except being born into the wrong genetic category. The Zarathi warship Righteous Fury pursued with lethal intent. The refugees knew the border. Human space meant safety. It had always meant safety. They pushed their failing engines harder, hoping to cross the line before Righteous Fury's weapons reached them. They made it with minutes to spare. Human defense platforms powered up, targeting systems locking onto the Zarathi vessel. A human voice broadcast across all frequencies. This is human. Territory, Zarathi vessel, you are ordered to halt pursuit. Refugees, you may not cross into human space. We are no longer accepting asylum seekers from Council species under Council directive. The refugees couldn't believe what they were hearing. Human space was sanctuary. It had always been sanctuary. They broadcast desperate pleas as Righteous Fury opened fire. 2 transports exploded instantly. The third took critical damage, life support failing. 3,000 beings died screaming for help that humanity was forbidden to provide. The human platforms remained active, ready to defend their border, but they did nothing to save the refugees. Orders were orders. The galaxy wanted humans to stop interfering. Humans were complying. On the Kwarathi colony world of Crystal Falls, plague outbreak protocols activated. The disease spread through the population with horrifying speed. Colonial Governor Thess had seen this before. A similar outbreak 5 cycles ago had been contained in days by human medical teams. She sent the request for assistance with absolute certainty. Earth Medical Command responded within an hour. Our humanitarian obligations are fulfilled. We provided complete medical database downloads to Council Medical Authority as per departure protocols. Council resources are sufficient for this emergency. We wish you the best in your recovery efforts. The Council medical teams had the data but not the experience. They arrived 4 days late and struggled to implement procedures the humans had made look effortless. The plague burned through Crystal Falls for 3 weeks. 70,000 Kwarathi died. Thess survived and spent every remaining day of her life wondering how she had voted for restrictions against the species who could have saved her people. By week's end, 47 incidents had occurred where human intervention would have changed outcomes. 85,000 beings died who would have lived. Economies in 3 sectors showed stress from the sudden absence of human trade facilitation. 12 species experienced crises they couldn't handle alone. In the council chambers, a junior analyst named Rena compiled a routine report. She noticed the pattern immediately. Every incident shared one common factor. All had occurred in situations where humans would previously have intervened. She flagged the report for review. Her supervisor dismissed it with barely a glance. Humans were overcommitted anyway. The galaxy functioned before they joined. It will adjust. File the report and stop worrying. Rena filed it with a timestamp, knowing someone would eventually want to know exactly when the warnings started. On Earth, Ambassador Cole reviewed the same data Rena had compiled. His team had predicted this. They had warned the Council. No one had listened. Helen Brooks stood beside him, reading over his shoulder. "They think we're bluffing," she said. "They think we'll come back," Cole agreed. "They don't understand what they've lost yet." He closed the report and looked out at the stars. But they will. 4 weeks after humanity's departure, the emergency council session convened with none of the confident energy that had marked their previous victory. The speaker struggled to maintain order as reports flooded in from across council space. What had seemed like isolated incidents had cascaded into a full crisis. Pirate attacks had increased 300% in border regions. Without human patrol ships maintaining security, raiders grew bold enough to attack major trade routes. The Voskin Empire, despite their military strength, lost 4 merchant convoys in 2 weeks. Their forces couldn't cover the vast territories humans had protected for free. The trade disruptions revealed an uncomfortable truth. Humans hadn't just traded their own goods. They had maintained complex logistics networks connecting dozens of species. With humanity gone, these networks collapsed like houses built on sand. Worlds that imported food faced shortages. Colonies that exported raw materials couldn't reach buyers. Economic chaos spread sector by sector. The Metherian collective stood before the council, their representatives' crystalline voice lacking its previous confidence. Metherian Station 7 suffered life support failure during a stellar storm. 15,000 inhabitants required emergency evacuation. Council medical ships arrived 41 hours after our distress call. 6,200 of our people died waiting. The speaker remembered the Metherian demands that humans stop interfering with natural selection. The irony was bitter. The council is working to improve response times, the speaker said, knowing the words were hollow. Human response time was 40 minutes, the Metherian representative said quietly. We voted to restrict them. We were fools. Ambassador Trill watched the proceedings with growing concern. The Voskin plan had been simple. Remove human freedom of action, expand Voskin influence into the power vacuum. It was working perfectly for Voskin interests. 3 independent systems had already requested Voskin protection, but the costs were mounting in ways Trell hadn't anticipated. Resource shortages were becoming critical. Humans had controlled 90% of heavy element mining in hazardous zones. Their technology and biology allowed them to operate in environments that killed other species. Rare materials essential for medical equipment, ship drives, and agricultural systems were now unavailable at any price. The refugee crisis exploded beyond anyone's worst predictions. Without human asylum programs, displaced populations had nowhere to go. The Zorathi Dominion intensified their persecution, knowing refugees couldn't flee to human space. 3 independent colonies fell to raiders who understood that humans wouldn't intervene. Survivors flooded into Council space, creating humanitarian nightmares. Council economists presented forecasts that painted a devastating picture. Galactic trade volume had dropped 18% and was falling. If trends continued, they predicted major economic depression within 2 cycles. Worlds heavily dependent on human-facilitated trade faced possible collapse. Their recommendation was unanimous: restore human trade access immediately. The speaker called for a vote on sending a diplomatic mission to Earth. Before the vote could proceed, Ambassador Trell stood. The Council must not show weakness. These problems are temporary. Council species have simply grown dependent on human charity. We must learn self-reliance. Approaching Earth now would validate their arrogance. The smaller species erupted in fury. The Frel ambassador, representing colonies that had lost hundreds to raiders, shouted across the chamber. Easy for Voskin to say, your empire expands while our people die. You wanted human restrictions to clear your path to power. You care nothing for the costs others pay. The unity that had passed the restrictions shattered. Accusations flew. 2 species threatened to leave the council entirely. The speaker called for order repeatedly, but the damage was done. The council was fragmenting along lines of those suffering from humanity's absence and those benefiting from it. Intelligence reports from human. Space told a story that made the crisis worse. Humanity wasn't suffering. Human colonies expanded peacefully into unclaimed territory. Human trade networks among themselves flourished. Human military maintained perfect security within their borders. Human medical research advanced rapidly without council bureaucracy slowing everything down. Humanity didn't need the council needed them. The 4 species who had voted against the restrictions sent desperate diplomatic messages to Earth. They begged for renewed human protection, offering trade concessions and political support. Ambassador Cole's response was identical to each. We appreciate your past support. However, we cannot extend protection to council members without violating the council's own restrictions against us. We suggest you petition the council for adequate defense forces. Late at night in private chambers, the speaker finally allowed the full weight of realization to settle. Humanity hadn't been aggressive. They had been everywhere because they were needed everywhere. They hadn't expanded dangerously. They had filled power vacuums others couldn't or wouldn't fill. They hadn't interfered. They had held a fragile peace together with their constant presence. The restrictions weren't protection from human dominance. They were removal of the galaxy's safety net, and the speaker had voted for them. Casualty reports updated hourly. 140,000 beings dead in 4 weeks, most from preventable causes, most in situations where human intervention would have saved them. The numbers climbed steadily, and everyone knew they would continue climbing. A Torven merchant who had celebrated human departure now sat in a refugee camp after raiders destroyed his ship and killed his crew. A Quarathi mother buried her children who died from a plague humans could have cured in days. A Zarathi refugee who had almost reached safety watched her family die at the border of human space. The galaxy was learning a harsh lesson. Humanity's constant presence hadn't been aggression. It had been mercy. Their willingness to help without demanding gratitude or payment hadn't been interference. It had been grace. And the Council had thrown it away because they feared becoming dependent on beings more capable than themselves. Ambassador Trell reviewed the same reports in private. Over 140,000 dead. Economic damage in the trillions, chaos spreading. But Voskin influence was growing. In the end, power mattered more than principles. Trell smiled and continued planning the next expansion. 3 months into the crisis, the speaker led a diplomatic delegation to Earth. 5 ambassadors accompanied, representing species genuinely remorseful about the restrictions. The Voskin Empire and their allies had refused to participate, still insisting the problems were temporary. The delegation carried formal requests to negotiate new terms. Geneva's diplomatic quarter received them with perfect courtesy. Ambassador Cole arranged comfortable accommodations and scheduled meetings with appropriate ceremony. The delegation took this as a positive sign. Perhaps humanity was ready to forgive. Perhaps the relationship could be restored. They were wronged. Cole received them in a conference room overlooking the Alps. The view was deliberately chosen, beautiful, peaceful, utterly secure. Everything Council space was not anymore. He offered refreshments and listened to their appeals without interruption. They spoke for 2 hours, detailing the crisis, acknowledging their mistakes, begging for humanity's return. When they finished, Cole spoke with the same calm that had marked his departure from the Council chamber. "We understand your difficulties. We are genuinely sorry for the suffering in Council space. However, humanity will not return under the previous relationship." The speaker leaned forward. "We're prepared to rescind all restrictions, full autonomy for human military operations, expanded territory rights, no Council oversight on human activities. We were wrong to limit you." Cole nodded slowly. "Yes, you were wrong, but removing the chains you placed on us isn't enough. You've shown us what happens when humanity exists at the Council's mercy. We won't put ourselves in that position again." He activated a holographic display showing humanity's terms. The delegation read in growing horror. If humans returned, it would be as senior partners, not members. Human security guarantees required human authority over all Council defense policy. Human medical assistance required human oversight of health protocols. Human trade participation required human control over commercial standards. "You're asking us to surrender Council sovereignty," the Quarathi ambassador said, voice shaking. "No," Cole corrected. "We're offering you protection and assistance on terms that prevent this situation from repeating. You asked us to submit to your authority. We declined. Now you ask us to return and submit again, just with fewer restrictions. Humanity has learned a valuable lesson these past months. We don't need you. You need us. We're willing to help, but only on terms that recognize that reality." The delegation returned to Council space with news that devastated what remained of unity. Some species wanted to accept any terms. Others refused to surrender sovereignty. The arguments grew heated enough that security forces had to intervene. The Council that had united against humanity now tore itself apart, arguing about how to bring them back. While the Council debated, the crisis accelerated. Casualties passed 400,000. The Voskin Empire seized 3 more independent systems. The Torven Republic expanded their slave territories. Smaller species faced extinction-level threats. Council military forces proved completely inadequate for actual warfare. The Yenna system faced catastrophe. Their sun began an unexpected collapse that would destroy all 12 planets. 12 billion inhabitants needed evacuation. Council ships could save perhaps 2 billion if they worked perfectly. The rest would die. Governor Pren begged Earth for assistance. The human assembly debated for 6 hours. The moral weight of 12 billion lives versus the principle of not rewarding the Council's actions. Cole argued for intervention with one condition. We save them, but Yenna leaves the Council and signs a mutual defense treaty with humanity. Pren agonized for 20 minutes. Accepting meant abandoning the Galactic Council. Refusing meant billions of deaths. She chose survival. Human evacuation fleets arrived within 18 hours. 12 billion beings relocated to safety in 48 hours of coordination that showcased human organizational superiority. Yenna signed the treaty immediately. 3 more species approached Earth within days. All faced existential threats. All had watched Yenna's salvation. All were willing to trade Council membership for human protection. Humanity accepted each request. By month's end, 7 species had left the Galactic Council to join what was now being called the Human Alliance. The Council fractured completely. Species split into factions. Some demanded they meet human terms, others refused any surrender. The Voskin led. Faction called the departing species traitors and threatened military action against anyone negotiating with humanity. The Council was at war with itself. Economic collapse accelerated. Galactic trade volume dropped 43%. 22 worlds faced famine. Medical supply chains collapsed across 4 sectors. The Metherian Collective, once proud and self-sufficient, requested emergency aid from the Human Alliance. They received observer status and limited assistance. Full aid required Council withdrawal. On Earth, Cole met with the President to review the emerging situation. Humanity was building a new power structure. Species that joined the Human Alliance received full protection, medical care, trade access, and disaster response. They also accepted human leadership in areas where humanity excelled. It wasn't democracy of equals. It was benevolent hierarchy. Is this what we want? Cole asked. To rule rather than participate. The President looked out at the city below. We tried equality. They used it against us. We offered partnership. They demanded submission. Now we offer protection at a price. Maybe that's more honest than pretending we're all equal when we're clearly not. The speaker sent a final personal message to Cole. No other ambassadors, no formality, just 2 beings who had once worked together. We were afraid of you not because you were aggressive, but because you were better. We saw smaller species looking to Earth before the Council. We saw our own influence fading. We told ourselves you were dangerous. We were wrong. Will you help us? Cole's response was immediate. 3 months ago, I would have negotiated. I would have found compromise, but I've watched 400,000 beings die while the Council argued. The galaxy doesn't need the Council anymore. It needs humanity. You chose sides. Now live with it. The Council called a vote. 16 to 15. They would negotiate surrender terms. Ambassador Trell walked out in disgust. The Voskin Empire would stand alone. 6 months after humanity walked away in silence, Ambassador Cole stood before the Human Alliance Assembly on Earth. The chamber was massive, designed to accommodate representatives from 43 species. Holographic displays showed members participating remotely from dozens of worlds. This was nothing like the old Council. Humanity chaired every major committee. Humans held veto power on security matters, but member species reported unprecedented prosperity and safety. The Human Alliance operated on clear principles. Humanity led in security, disaster response, and resource development. Member species contributed expertise in specialized fields. All maintained internal sovereignty. External policy coordinated through Earth. It wasn't the democracy the Council had pretended to be. It was an alliance built on competence and mutual benefit. The remnant Galactic Council sent their formal surrender. 12 species remained, and they accepted humanity's terms. They would dissolve the council and join the alliance. The terms were harsh but necessary. Council military forces integrated under human command. Council territories open to human settlement. Trade operated under alliance standards. The speaker, no longer a leader, would serve as cultural advisor. The Voskin Empire had tried to stand alone. They lasted 4 months before their economy collapsed. Without access to human trade networks, their currency became worthless. Without human security support, they lost border territories to raiders they had once hired. Their allies abandoned them one by one. Now Ambassador Trell arrived on Earth with unconditional surrender. Cole received Trell in a modest office, not the grand chamber where they had once met as equals. Trell tried to maintain dignity, but desperation showed in every movement. The Voskin Empire requests admission to the human alliance. Under what terms? Cole asked, though he already knew. Any terms humanity deems appropriate. The admission cost Trell visible pain. Cole leaned back in his chair. You saw our compassion as weakness. You mistook our restraint for inability. You thought the galaxy could function without us. You were wrong on every count. Your species will be welcomed into the alliance, but you will never hold leadership positions. Trust must be earned back over generations. Trell accepted without argument. The alternative was watching the Voskin Empire collapse completely. The final casualty count was devastating. 738,000 beings dead in 6 months. Economic damage had reduced galactic GDP by 42%. 14 planets suffered famines. 3 species went extinct. 71 major conflicts erupted without human peacekeepers. The human alliance had prevented further catastrophe, but couldn't undo the damage already done. Not all humans were comfortable with the new order. Protests on Earth demanded return to egalitarian principles. Some argued humanity had become what it fought against. Cole addressed these concerns in a public broadcast. We offered equality, they used it to chain us. We offered friendship, they answered with restrictions. We offered help freely. They demanded we ask permission to save lives. We didn't choose dominance. We chose to survive. If that makes us tyrants in some eyes, so be it. At least beings aren't dying while we debate principles. The Yenna representative spoke to the Alliance Assembly. Humanity saved my species from extinction. They asked for loyalty in return. Yes, they hold ultimate authority on military matters. Yes, they control resource development in hazardous zones. Yes, they set standards we must follow. But they respond to every distress call, cure every disease they can reach, and protect every member with absolute commitment. The old council gave us votes, but not security. Humanity gives us security and asks only that we trust their judgment. I'll take that trade every time. The Metherian collective formally apologized. We called your compassion weakness. We demanded you let species fail without help. Then you granted our wish. We learned that natural selection in a technological galaxy means death, not evolution. Compassion is the foundation of civilization. We were fools. Please forgive us. The new galaxy took shape rapidly. Trade routes operated securely under human naval protection. Medical emergencies received response within hours. Refugees found sanctuary. Colonies expanded safely. Pirates and raiders faced overwhelming human military response. Aggressive empires reconsidered their ambitions. It wasn't perfect. Some species chafed under human dominance. Some humans worried about capacity for abuse of power. But it worked. Earth dedicated a memorial to the 738,000 beings who died during the separation. The monument included every name. Cole spoke at the dedication. These beings died because species who should have known better played political games with lives they considered expendable. We remember them. We honor them. We vow that humanity will never again allow politics to prevent us from saving lives. If that means we must lead, we will lead. We tried being equals. You turned equality into a weapon against us. This is the galaxy you chose. The former speaker wrote in a private journal. We had beings who asked nothing for their service. They patrolled our borders, healed our sick, saved our stranded, and fed our hungry. They asked only for respect and equal voice. We gave them neither. We feared their competence more than our inadequacy. We destroyed something beautiful because we couldn't bear sharing glory with those who earned it. Humanity's dominance now is our creation. We forced them to choose between submission and supremacy. They chose supremacy. We have no one to blame but ourselves. Ambassador Cole walked the empty halls of the old council chamber on Harmony's gate. The station was being decommissioned. Soon it would be just a museum. He paused where humanity's delegation had sat that day 6 months ago. He remembered the walk to the door, the silence, the certainty that things would never be the same. The galaxy had changed forever. Humanity led it now. Whether that was triumph or tragedy, only time would tell. But one thing was certain. That silence as humans walked away had been the sound of an era ending. The council just hadn't realized it until too late.